Do you like conversation on a variety of topics? Feel like no one wants to talk about the things that interest you? Tired of only hearing the same political, sports, or catastrophe talk? Yeah, we feel that way too. Join two high-functioning geeks as they discuss just about anything under the sun. We can't tell you what we'll be talking about each week because we don't know where our brains will take us. It will be an interesting conversation though, so hang on and join us. Here comes the Relentless Geekery.
Wow, you've got a nice background today. Where'd you find that one?
It's as a matter of fact, this is the kitchen table at my parents' house, and it's actually kind of weird because with no light source, I'm looking really like shadowed here. Let me get a light on overhead and see if that's
Yeah.
so. Sorry about this. Leaving the. I should have done a little experimenting. That doesn't put a lot on me, does
A
it?
little better.
All right, one more. And I think if let's see, that's a little bit more from the kitchen. Does that balance me out? The big thing, of course, is that the sun is coming right, against the patio door here. And so, this is the best I got for today. I could go elsewhere, but oh wait, I just tilted it and that made it better. Who knows? Who knows? Who knows?
Well, we've got clouds here, but the whole side over here is like shiny. Maybe I should.
And that's true. I don't have direct reflection. So, okay.
Alan, how are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. Thank you. I don't have anything cool on. I just have generic, this isn't really geekery, but I guess it is. One of the interesting things about being out in California is how much of my fantastic working environment that I have at home at the Skynet home office how can I recreate it? How much do I bring with me? So right now I'm on, my MacBook Air laptop with its reasonable sound and reasonable camera, which is kind of a miraculous thing, compared to however many 5, 10, 20 years ago,
right?
When they first started to have FaceTime, first started to have any kind of pre-Zoom and stuff like that, you really had to have matched equipment to make sure that your teleconference worked correctly and that there wasn't constant stuttering that interrupts of each other, didn't like wreck it.
Right.
And boy, they really seem to have solved so much of that. There is still a little bit of cutting in and out, but my ongoing assumption now is as long as I have my laptop or my phone and Zoom, you really can do this from pretty much anywhere.
Yeah.
And they have noise cancellation. So if I was sitting there in an airport, we could still have a conversation without worrying about being drowned out by all the announcements, all the kids screaming, all that. So,
and like you said, your phone too. I mean, it's amazing how, like you said, 10, 15, 20 years ago, to go on any type of out somewhere to a client to do a meeting, anything. I have my laptop, I have my phone, I have this charger, I have this cable, I have this extra thing. It was just this big bag of stuff. And now literally, if I'm going out of town or I'm working remotely, I grab a laptop and my phone and I'm pretty much set. And that's crazy knowing what it used to
be. And this is kind of, again, interesting artifact. When you and I do this at home, we're still within 30, 40 miles of each other.
Right.
Now we're within, and I just looked it up, we're like 2,400 miles, 2,371. Because when I was talking with my mom yesterday and I was saying, instead of being local, I'm actually all the way over in Lakewood. And when she said how far, it's like, well, I think it's like between 2,000 and 3,000 miles. And she, for some reason, she kind of wanted to know. And so in real time on my phone, I could put in maps and say, if I'm trying to get from Lakewood to Oceanside, 2,370, an hour, a day and 10 hours driving if you drove straight through,
right.
Aided by an artificial enhanced means, perhaps. I don't think I would. So unless you were doing what's the name of the races where they try to go coast to coast in the fastest time ever?
Right. Like the movie Hidalgo with the horse. And
Cannonball Run was a movie about that, that kind of thing. But it's just amazing that you can do that. Yeah. Well, another thing that I'm realizing is, so I'm very spoiled. At home, I have a 2 monitor setup. Each of them is like 24 or 27 inches. I'm used to having a lot of screen real estate. And the way I've tuned it is like my mind. I don't want to be distracted, but I don't mind having my browser open and my email and my calendar, and just whatever I need to work
Right.
on, my top 3, 4, 5 things, I can easily get to it. That compresses and crushes down into a little laptop screen. And
Right.
so I said, well, the last thing that we do when we're getting out of here, house sold, mom gone, etc. I don't want to say that out loud. Sorry. It'll be a truck of stuff for each of us brothers coming back to the Midwest and dropping things off. So I've been emboldened by, well, if you're going to get a truck anyway, I can get a couple other things here. So I go looking for, like, how can I get an external monitor, just as if I was running a presentation at various different places. You know, you and I have talked about, I got all the adapters I need to go from my Mac video out to HDMI or DVI or
Right.
VGA for that matter. And so I found like a high rated, high quality monitor, like 27, 24 inch maybe, for like $150.
Yeah.
And that's not nothing. You know, I always think about, wow, $150, you know, that you don't just throw that around. But for the recapture of how I like to work and the enhancement of my life when I'm out here a week out of a month for the foreseeable future, it just seemed like a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah.
So, and in this era of Amazon delivers, it'll be arriving like today. You know, I thought of doing this Tuesday while I was in the airport, and I kind of cleared it with Colleen to make sure that it was all, you know, I'm not, um, I'm not addicted to my setup, but when you're here for days in a row, I don't know. So
Makes
I
a
guess another,
difference.
you know, the geekery part of it is the confidence with which that same setup that I've used to be able to go into any environment when I'm doing a presentation and know that it doesn't matter what laptop projector they have or if they have a
Right.
Windows box or whatever, I'm going to be able to sub in my Mac with my adapters and in 2 minutes troubleshoot things so that I'm up and running on that screen.
Yeah.
And and it is kind of funny. Things are deteriorating a little bit as we got, you know, when you did your cool presentation and find out that HDMI cables have like different endedness. Where the,
I,
you know, and so far as I know, I'm not sure who was labeled on the cable, but
it
I would
was
expect
stupid
if
me
there
to,
was a difference, it would have a big fucking thing on it hanging off saying TV end, PC
yeah.
end. You know what I mean? But you're not used to looking for that.
I've never seen a
USB is,
cable like that.
yeah, you know, so, and as much as they're not putting smarts into cables, you know, where it does its own, I don't know, signal strengthening, or maybe it's copy protection, or whatever else it might be, they're building things into cables because you can miniaturize things so much now that it does have some smarts to it, but it's not the expectation. For a long time, every phone cord was exactly the same, as was
Right.
every Ethernet cable, as was every HDMI cable, and now they're not.
Well, there's a, that's a good right there. We've talked a little bit about this, but the
Mhm.
specifications and the standards, people don't realize that back in the day, how many different types of plugins you had on the computer, and PC and Apple had different ones. And at the time, you remember like AT&T came out with their own computers and everybody had their own stuff. So every now and then you get this weird connector that's only for them. And, it was definitely better now
Exactly.
when everything's basically USB with a few other things.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, you learn pain. The monitor that I bought is HP. Specifically avoided HP because they're one of the ones where back when you were doing additional memory in a PC, and there was the LIM standard, right? Lotus, Intel, Microsoft, I guess. But there were some that did other things than that. And HP was one of them, where the basic assumptions that you could make about how a Windows box works, in some cases, a little bit like Microsoft, embrace, extend, and extinguish. Things were better in what they were doing, but you had to commit to HP. And if the whole point of going with a Windows environment was more people making things, so it kept prices down, more software. Well, I don't want my things to break on HP boxes because I saved $50 over here, and now I'm losing that I can't use Intuit or something like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I had that little twinge of, when you go past a place where you once got a speeding ticket, every time you go by there, you slow down because your reptile brain memory says danger, danger. You know what I mean?
Right.
This is a place where you get tickets. And so I'm hoping that HP hasn't continued its wayward ways, that instead, if I put an HDMI cable in there, it's just going to work instead
Right.
of, oh, that's an additional.
Right, right. When I worked at the computer store, people would bring in HP computers and we'd be like, oh, hey, it's your turn to fix it. Nobody wanted to touch them. Then
Right.
they'd be come in and say, well, what would you recommend? I saw this great HP. I'm like, but the problem is the reasons we recommended not getting an HP didn't make sense to the normal person. Well, it runs all the same stuff. Well, it's cheaper. That was, they marketed it just like they should have. But,
Yeah.
if you knew, you knew.
Exactly. And I'll say, it wasn't only HP PCs. They have had great workhorse printers for a long time. That's
Yeah.
kind of how they made their name. You know what I mean?
That's what I got right now.
Exactly. But unfortunately, they were the first ones to, for their cartridges, build in the smarts that said, hey, I'm going to be able to let you know when your cartridge is getting low. Well, that's handy to know. Oh, but also I'm going to check to make sure that it's an official HP cartridge.
Right.
And then that whole industry that's based on refilling cartridges or just having a third party, like, I'm just naming them, Epson, Brother, so many other places don't do that. HP was the one that did. And again, that kind of, in legal terms, a tying agreement, you know what I mean? Where you make it so that it only works if you use up and down the vertical chain, all
Right.
the same things from a vendor. That's just a way of them getting additional money because you have to buy that HP cartridge for 79 bucks instead of a refill for 39 or whatever else it might be. And I don't really care about the money. I care about the principle of the thing, that I don't want to do business with a company that's trying to addict you, that's
Right.
trying to force you to only use their stuff.
Which arguably is just about all of them. I mean, you could give that same argument with Apple and Microsoft. Microsoft's done it. Apple's tended more towards it since Steve Jobs is gone. And,
Yeah.
and not that they didn't do it before, it was just probably there. So it's corporations, man.
You know what it might be? It's that there's a sense of proportion to it. By that meaning, like, I could see how from platform to platform, Mac OS and Windows OS, very different. And there's justification for having things be dedicated to each of those different platforms. But what could be more generic than printer dust? You know what I mean?
Well,
The fact that they found a way to say, hey, that popsicle stick, that doesn't fit in every popsicle.
right.
What do you mean? That's the most generic thing I can think of. No, no longer. We found a way to put a chip on a popsicle stick. And you know what I mean? I don't like where they get all sneaky.
Well, remember back when 95 hit and Microsoft basically started paying all the companies to take all the smarts and drivers off the hardware, and they put it all in Windows. So if you bought one of these, it's like $100 cheaper than the other stuff, but you had to only run it on Windows. There were printers and modems and video cards. Well, video cards anyway. Well, not now, but they said, we'll pay you. So people have to get our, Microsoft's not dumb.
Exactly. And that's kind of funny. Again, the geekery aspect, like, business doesn't care about a lot of that as long as if I buy 1,000 boxes and they all work within my company, I'm okay. But if you're a gamer, if you're an individual who wants to maximize the use and that you actually think about, well, there's a new video card out, I want to upgrade so I get that faster refresh rate and more pixels and all that kind of stuff. And then you have to go into that world of drivers and compatibility and slot, like something that sure looks like the same slot that I'm plugging this into, and yet they start to play with the pins and stuff like that. Right. So the gamers were the ones that always seem to be like, there's new technology being developed, but there's pain associated with embrace of new technology. And boy, I guess in the overall, you and I have talked about this, I never minded doing it because it was education. Once I know this, part of my being a consultant is now whenever anybody says, hey, I'm getting this weird thing over here, it's like, oh, I bumped into that. It's because your XYZ is not really compatible with this. So you have to download this little, widget, Google, whatever, thing, and that'll clear it up for you. But how would they have known that? My stereotype was always, oh, you didn't read Appendix D of the manual where it talks about the very specific things that this requires. And it was nice. It's almost like you get people talk about the techno priests and the magicians. Well, if you were just a guy that knew more, that had bumped into more of those crazy situations, you really could look like you were just pulling things out of the air or pulling them out of somewhere lower, but at least you knew how to conquer it.
Yeah.
And instead of being, I have no clue. Unfortunately, like we've also talked about, now that things have become more opaque, any number of times I'm like, oh, why in the world? I have no clue. I haven't bumped into the HDCP thing with my Roku box and my TV. And it's kind of funny. If you don't mind, I think that's an interesting theme. So I'm also trying to set that up here. I have an older Roku box compared to the Roku Ultra that I have at home now. So I brought that about with me just to say, well, let's see if it works. My dad has an old Sony Bravia TV, so it has like a single HDMI port. So then it's, okay, am I going to get one of those HDMI splitters? And they do different splittings where you can have one thing go in and out to multiple monitors, or you can have three things go in and go out to a single monitor. So I have to be careful about that. And like you and I talked about, when I was troubleshooting at home, you find out that all the HDMI ports aren't the same. If it has multiple ports, this is the one that handles the copy protection. This is the one that handles the music better. You know what I mean? And so now I'm cobbling this together, and it's cool that if it works, it's going to be, wow, well, his TV is even older than mine, and this older box, and yet somehow it still interoperates. But what's the first glitch that's going to happen where, Disney doesn't work, even though it should, because they do something that is more modern and checks and doesn't let it go to, you know what I
Roku
mean?
upgraded the OS, and Disney put some code in there and paid them for it. And that's it. I mean, that's happened so often, you know?
Yeah. And what's funny is I didn't just name Disney randomly. If I was to pick a company that was trying to say, what are we going to do to make sure that our stuff is more specifically only allowed, et cetera? So I could have picked Netflix because, as you know, there's a little bit of a controversy going on now where
they're cracking down.
Cracking down because there's been so much Netflix sharing. And I really think that shouldn't have been allowed. There really should be, hey, you know, an IP address, you know that if you're sharing from different locations in the house, still legit. If you're sharing from California, Texas, and Ohio, maybe not so much. You know what I mean? So I'm looking forward to, when I get this all set up, what really works and what doesn't. And again, having that little bit of, anybody else who has an older TV and you're thinking of, can I use a newer box on an old TV? I'll have some insight into, well, you got to make sure that you have an Ethernet capable, because if the TV has any smarts, then you can see if the firmware for the TV has any update.
Right.
And then you know what I mean? Like there's going to be a whole cascade of what I'm going to try before I say, well, this works and this doesn't. I can watch 3 of my channels, if you will. I can watch Netflix and HBO Max, but I can't get to Disney or whatever else it might be.
Right.
Oh, well, so.
And that's what we were talking about with the differences and all that, Mac OS and the controlling like HP has done. But now we're getting more third parties that we're able to rely on. So it really is, it goes back and forth. So, you know, things get a little cracked down, and for a while, you know, but now you got more choices. And Linux, and I usually wouldn't recommend any Linux to just the average home user, because they're going to want to download software and stuff, and then it's not going to work. But, and this helps with the travel, how much stuff is on a service that's web-based that you go through a browser? I could literally only have a browser and probably do everything I do in a day. Some of it might take a little more work, you know, FTP, you can do it through the browser. It takes a little work. Programming, like there's one of the apps I have for writing that is right through the browser. And then the cool thing is I can pull it up on my desktop, on my laptop, on my phone, on my Mac Mini, and it
works everywhere.
Yeah,
exactly. Yep.
You know, and that's where we're getting a lot of that. You know, that's why people can say, well, I don't care about Mac or Windows. I have a Chromebook because I do everything through a web browser.
Yes, and they really, that I have said that to people where they think that there's still a war on. And it really is, it hasn't been. It hasn't been since we had ubiquitous browsers that take care of all that incompatibility, if you will. And they've got their own little war that, you know, depending on how much they follow the HTML standard and CSS and the various different things. If you throw Adobe into the mix, then it works better on some platforms than others.
How much extra crap they have built into it.
Right. I still have, and this boggles my mind actually, I still have for Ticketmaster that I can't buy tickets through Safari, the default Macintosh browser, because it brings up a pop-up window that isn't fully secure, and other browsers that have their own security that matches it to HTTPS, but it's not really the secure version, they'll still bring it up. The Mac just says, no, this isn't the standard, and so we're not going to show it to you.
Yeah.
So every time that I'm like, especially if you do this thing where, oh, tickets just went on sale at 10 in the morning, and I'm going to hop right on and get really close tickets, and then I'm ready to buy, it's like, I forgot about the problem with Ticketmaster and Safari, and then I got to go recreate all that, and you lose your spot in the queue. It's like, damn it, I'm going to be 6 rows further back because so I have to remember.
and you know, browsers are funny. I've got Chrome and Firefox and Edge and Blaze and Opera, and I still have a Maya or whatever that's supposed to be for helping
I have Brave, I have Safari, I have exactly, you know, and it's kind of funny. I did that for a long time when I was really doing much more coding and was making sure that I was on multi-platform stuff. I would check every browser and look for the weird inconsistencies and could I resolve them? And I would also check various different versions of the OSs, you know, so Mac deteriorates pretty well. Windows, there was often big changes between what was the previous to Edge, Explorer, you know what I mean? Like that they had various different things. And just the amount of overhead that went with that, I kept thinking there has to be someone that's going to put together the automated testing box that's going to say, you check boxes as to all the platforms you think you need to support, and I will run it through and give you an error report that says, this is what breaks here, this, that, you know, the code has been decremented here, decremented. You know what I mean? Where browsers are an interesting thing because they're, it's not really compiled. I don't know. It changes depending on where you go. Sometimes if it's got any kind of Java or any kind of live code in it, it downloads things. You'll download what it needs while it needs it. But then you also, I don't know what current version of those various different things is because it kind of does that in the background and I'm not aware of what it's doing with, and it's not just Java, it's PLC, it's what are all the other, you know, there's kind of like
well, just all the media, how that gets handled, you know, with the new versions of HTML and stuff.
Right. There's different compressors and decompressors. There's various different, you know, things that will let you look at all the different kinds of GIFs. And it's like, you know I say GIF, but I said GIF because the guy just died. And so I gave him GIF because he insisted it was GIF, even though it's a hard G in graphic.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, so, unless you have a GIF, then
right. Exactly. I just stumbled onto, I like to keep my stuff up to date because it eliminates all those weird little glitches that you don't realize is happening just because you're one.
And sometimes creates brand new ones.
And does do that too. There's associated. Well, there used to be a thing called Mac Update. So Mac's App Store has gotten really good with it. Anything you get from the App Store, it automatically keeps updated in the background, and you never have these incompatibilities. But you don't get everything from the Mac App Store. You get things from many other vendors.
Right.
So there's a cool utility called Mac Update that used to take care of scanning in the background and letting you know, I can automatically do this for you, or you have to run an installer and here's where to get it and all that kind of stuff. And I guess whoever was running it, owning it, got tired and they stopped updating it like 2 Mac OSs ago. And I keep getting requests from them to keep my subscription going, even though I'm on a Mac OS that they don't support anymore. So you'd think that a place that checks the update, checks the compatible version of everything, would check my compatible version of Mac OS and say, why am I telling you that Mac Update Desktop should be? Anyway, so I've abandoned them. There's a new utility called Mac Updater, which is like, why would they do that? Why would they create that ambiguity? But they did. And that one seems to do all of what I used to like the old one did. And it's very current and it's very smart and all that kind of stuff. And then I got to see over the course of 2 years just how many things had deteriorated. Like there's a cool thing for the Mac called Graphic Converter. I'm not sure if there's a Windows version of it, but all of what we just talked about, good Lord, there are so many photo things and animated graphics and all different kinds of things that if you want to change between them, this really will do it. It really knows enough about the formats for every single thing. It handles like 130 or something. And so if you're trying to, I've had a number of times where I'm going to a website and wants me to upload a picture of myself as part of my profile. Well, I have a pretty standard PNG that I use. Oh, this one somehow doesn't take PNGs. What? You know, this is like you don't speak English, you don't take dollars.
2022, man.
And so then if I really need to be on that site, I'll go and convert it to whatever they require, a TIFF or something like that. But I'm like, man, if I if I had to depend on each of those applications to do the conversion for me, none of them seem to do it. This cool Swiss Army knife of graphic formats has saved my bacon dozens of times, just to be able to, no matter what people are asking for, I can give it to you in that format. And so far as I can tell, it doesn't degrade it. It doesn't deteriorate it. Where, oh, now this is all pixelated. It can only handle, you know what I mean? It really needs to be and perpetually updated. So whenever there is an update of that new standard, it embraces those new things that now it includes meta information and all that kind of cool stuff. It's really nice.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, I do use Linux a little bit here and there. Again, I just can't get myself to use it daily because I always run into little things that are aggravating and take too long and
Right, and
don't
your
work.
time is valuable. You don't want to spend your time
Yeah,
in troubleshooting mode all the time.
all
you
right. But there are some times when the first thing I do is like, okay, I have a problem. I need a certain type of software. I need a different type of software or blah, whatever it happens to be. I will do a search, and first thing I'll do is look for open source Linux type software and see what's available, because a lot of times is really good and really powerful and works. And even better now, they're coming out with Mac and Windows versions. It used to be like a Linux only version. Now it's Mac and Windows, and it's open source. And so, there are some, but again, it's not something if you are just the casual user, home user.
That's right. What was interesting is looking at that in 2 years worth of not having touched various different things, there were any number of things that I hadn't used it in 2 years. So I hadn't been prompted by OpenOffice or LibreOffice to say, hey, we've got new updates. And so I guess it's nice to have that around when I really have to get something from somewhere else and I can't use Microsoft because there's something on, but it had been that long since I'd had to do that. And so it's kind of handy, oh, I guess I do have that. And then also I kept making little notes to myself of, whatever current that desktop I'm on, because I'm on the M1 version, I thought that I had pretty much loaded everything I might need over the course of the first couple of weeks. But then, oh, I have LibreOffice, but not OpenOffice. And then you're like, oh, OpenOffice is no longer being supported. So maybe I checked that back then, but maybe it just is the passage of time sometimes kills off noble efforts like an open source Microsoft suite. And so that little reacquaintance with, oh, that's a good font handling utility. I don't really deal with fonts at a deep level anymore. That's another thing that's kind of a solved problem. But if ever I had to do something where I have to worry about the difference between a font and a font and the whole family that doesn't include not only italic and bold, but other things to it, now I have this thing that will fix that for me so it'll be compatible or whatever,
Right. And it's funny you mentioned OpenOffice and LibreOffice, because I use both of those. I have them on my Windows and I have them on my Linux systems. And there's things I do with some surveys that I get as a spreadsheet. And the easiest way to use it is to convert it to a CSV and open it in OpenOffice. And it's easier to manipulate and do things than Excel because, for this particular thing, and I convert it and use it. And LibreOffice is recommended quite often for writing, but it's also the one that comes installed on a Raspberry Pi. So, and like what I mentioned about the clouds. So I do my writing on Scrivener usually on my Windows, but I have Vellum on my Mac, and that's what does the formatting and stuff. So I have to export it, save it as a Word doc into my iCloud drive. Then I open up my Mac and there it is. Boom. I pulled in the Vellum, it formats. So again, it's using the best tools, and there are tools on Windows, but that's always, everybody says Vellum's it. That's just use it. I have the flexibility. I can use them all. I don't have to, stick with just one.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny. We probably should have said right at the very start of the episode, we should have said, hey, everybody who has a smartphone, you're probably not going to care about all this talk of file compatibility and converting, because it does all that in the background. There's no longer even having to worry about what SUV or something like that is attached to it. Only occasionally when you really do get a PDF that you can't open for some reason, because whatever it might be, sometimes there really are things that won't open on your phone, but they've made that invisible because it was such a hassle for so many people of having to deal with the difference between an XLS and an XLX or whatever, the various different standards that Microsoft has had. And I guess I'm happy about that on the phone. but I'm aware that sometimes it really does matter, platform to platform or whatever, that at least you know what to do in case it breaks.
Right.
You know what I mean? We've talked about this before. The more that it gets opaque, the more that also means that when something does break, you don't even know what to do. You don't even know where to start.
Exactly.
So,
Yeah. We should do a talk sometime about little tricks we've learned on the phones and things that people may not realize.
Yeah,
Oh,
that I'll tell you, that used to be a fixture. Every Macworld conference that I went to, there was a guy named Dr. McIntosh, Bob Levitas, if I remember right. And I don't know if I ever heard his name said out loud. I think it's Levitas. And he had that all the little bits that he had picked up over the course of time. And you could just, while he was talking, hear people in the audience going, so that's what that, you know what I mean? That it was
yes.
going to save somebody so much work and so much pain of just I'm not sure how much this matters nowadays. It used to matter that you knew what the loading order of things were. That
Right.
it really did make it that you had to put something in place first, so that whatever little changes, little demons and stuff it set running didn't collide with something else. There was even a thing, a Macintosh facility called Conflict Catcher, that not only told you about that had a whole database of what had to do it in order, but if you really couldn't figure out what was going on, it would do things like start with your set of, let's say, 16 different things, and it would say, okay, I'm going to run the first 8 and not the second 8, and if that all works, then I know that it's not in that set of 8. And it would do 8, 4, 2, 1, and do various different mixtures. Then it would say, it looks like the problem is with XYZ. And you know what I mean? So it actually, that was such a common problem that it had automated the binary search way of figuring out this guy either has to get eliminated or has to get a newer version, or you have to put it at the very start or at the very end of all this. And there are certain things that I really abandoned because though they were powerful, they didn't play well with others. You know what I mean? You just couldn't put them into the mix with all the other stuff. It's like, and you make that last ditch effort of going to their website, and in the, hey, contact us, you put the box, okay, here's what I got going on, and you don't work with all these things, and really, how can you be incompatible with Adobe or Microsoft or Mac OS and that kind of stuff? So it's not just me. This has to be causing pain to a lot of other people. Maybe you need to not just put it out there, but actually do some of this kind of compatibility testing. And maybe 1 out of 10 times would somebody actually, you'd see the next version had fixed whatever was wrong with it. A lot of times it just seemed to be, I don't know, it's a kid doing it as a hobby, and they don't want to do all that testing. They want to move on to the next cool thing. So.
And that's one of the things, and this actually is a little bit of a tech update I mentioned and goes right into it. One of the things we've talked about, difference between Macs and Windows, is Windows, I mean, I don't want to say open in the sense of open source, but it was open because anybody could write software and hardware and get it all to work into there. And it was, it was pretty easy to do relatively. And so that's why we had 500 million choices of everything. Apple went the other direction and tried to really clamp down and focus on, okay, this works. It works with everything else. That's your choice, and we don't need 500 million choices, and they kept it small. So yes, there are sometimes incompatibilities on Windows, and everyone always blames Microsoft. It's like, it's not Microsoft. It's because you bought from a bad company that doesn't know how to make drivers. That's really the problem. Microsoft did what they did to allow those types of things. But that said, what I've done in the last couple of days, this is something I mentioned way long ago, and I finally sat down and did it on my Mac. I've been doing publishing and some game programming, and mostly it's going to the phones and tablets, but you can do it for the desktops. With Windows, it's not too hard to create something. There's all sorts of online stores and stuff. You could, sell your games or whatever anywhere. Android, going through Google, again, it's not a huge problem. It's fairly easy to get it set up. But Apple says you have to have a Mac, and you have to get it certified, and you have to have certificates and security.
Sign it. So
So it's much more difficult, a lot more work, especially if you're mainly a Windows user. But it's also, I would say, more trustworthy. They don't get a lot of crap through. You don't hear about the flashlight programs that are ripping your contacts on the iPhone as you do Android.
Absolutely. That is exactly the reason that I have usually differentiated between Windows and Mac is not only the amount of software out there, like you said, in the age of the browser, that tends to matter less and less, but it absolutely was like if you're worried about malware, Apple has had a much better stance on that
Yes,
for a long time by
absolutely.
being that you have to certify and that you have to uh, stay within how they do controlled memory. You know what I mean? They really,
Right.
their OS is set up so that there really is partitioning and that they can't get root, they can't take your machine down, they can't lock your hard drive. That's worth a whole bunch of time and money to me to make sure that I'm not going to be the one that gets the email that says, hey, we encrypted your hard drive.
Right.
Hey, you know what I mean? And my biggest problem currently is, I think I might have mentioned this, I'm not anywhere near good about reusing passwords. By that meaning I do. And when even my longest, I think my longest one is still safe, but my second longest one, which I've used dozens of places, I just got word that it had been in a breach. So then the overhead of having to go to each one of those sites and update your thing, and Mac kind of conquered that by saying, we have a way of generating a password specific to a site, and we keep it for you. We keep it in a keychain that's encrypted, so it's not a hole into your system, but the hassle of how many places I have to go to, and other password managers besides Apple's, like 1Pass, LastPass, a couple things, they aren't perfect. And so sometimes it'll generate a new password, and I'll go back to the site later and be like, oh, it didn't save it.
Right.
Well, I don't remember the generated random one that you have, and I
Right.
wasn't used to taking if I take not a screenshot, maybe I need to take a screenshot because then it's on paper. Because if I take drag my cursor across it, do a copy, do a paste into a little document, so I have a document that has all my passwords. Tell me that that's not a security hole. Someone finds that plain text document and they have my passwords for everything.
Right.
So
And
it's
especially
not
we were
a
just
solved
talking about
problem.
cloud and stuff. So you save it,
Uh,
you're and it's everywhere.
exactly. So I don't mind. I'm moving more and more towards all the biometrics. If I have to put
Uh-huh.
my thumb down on my magic,
Face.
and I have to do face recognition, my new iPhone 13 Max does all of that. And the only hassle occasionally is, oh, I don't have it tilted so it can make out my face. Oh, I had to do a version of me with glasses on
Right.
and a version of me with my mask on, but now it handles all that. And so it's a little bit, I'm not exercising the memory muscle that has you remember the various different passwords, but it's also nobody else has my face
Right.
or my face with mask and that kind of stuff. So it's that much safer, and it doesn't have to worry about it didn't remember my password, and now I have to go through forgot your password. Here's a couple security questions about your first doggy or whatever else it
Right.
might be. You know what
Well,
I mean?
that works until I 3D print an owl.
And that's true. Since I just saw a movie where they had to like cut somebody's finger off in order to be able to get into the lab, it's like,
Yeah.
please don't take
Right.
my face off so that you can
Right.
use it to get into the
Right. So I don't know if you saw my post on this, but the coolest thing yesterday was when I was messing with everything.
Mhm.
I had to go through security certificates on the Mac and get them in the keychain and walk through all those steps. It's a lot of work,
Right.
but it was the coolest thing yesterday that I had Game Maker open, had a little program I created that I was putting on my Android. I think I showed it to you. Just,
Yeah.
hey, it works great. But
Yeah.
to be able to connect it to the Mac and it like shot it over there, it compiled on the Mac, and I could put it on my test iPad. And I'm like, that is just the coolest thing.
Right. Instead of having to drop to the command line and do all that in order to get something installed, that it really now does have all that compatibility and platform to platform transport and stuff. That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm spoiled by it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm spoiled by how easy they've made that.
Right.
If
Hey,
you
do what?
no, if you develop for the Mac at all and you use their development environment and use Swift, man, another way in which things have gotten so much better. I mean, I'm way back. He said all creaky. I was back in the days of Basic and Pascal and PL1 and PLC and C and C plus and C plus plus and on Fortran. I really probably know a dozen, 2 dozen different languages. Having said that, one of the things that made you like or not like various different languages was how they handled typing of variables. So you had to worry about really knowing whether it was character or numeric, and especially everything about garbage collection and memory management, and even more so just while you're working in the development environment, how do you know syntax? I don't want to be popping open a book to make sure that I have the right number of commas, because this thing takes 8 parameters. And if you don't have the parameter that you care about exactly in the right place, it breaks. And so they got all kinds of wonderful integration for when I use, any command, you can pop up things that say, here's how you know this is correct or not. It never lets you make just grammatical things. If you need a comma, it tells you about it. If it has, an open and closed paren and you're missing the closing paren, it'll tell you about it. So the amount of time that used to be spent way back in that crappy, name it, COBOL days of just having to run a program and having it break because you had something in the wrong column, or you had something that wasn't, it's taken all of that pain away. Consistently, the things that were taking the most of my time that weren't really about producing something beautiful, but were just overhead, like I said, memory management, they've got such great stuff now about avoiding memory leaks and making. So
Some
hats
of the
off to people that continue to develop these development environments, because it's its own very sophisticated program, and it handles multiple languages, and it'll like highlight things in different colors so that you can scan and pop open paragraphs and stuff. You can expand and collapse things, and just it has changed how I program, because that used to be when I'm trying to debug a program, print it all out and lay it on the table and go like, with colored pens almost matching. All the things I used to do, they did for me automatedly. Oh my
Go
God.
sub.
It's been that way, not just recently. That's been around for 20, 30 years. They got very smart very quickly. Some frustrated programmer says, I'm not going to write another program. I'm going to write a better development environment so that every program is going to be easier. Man, hats off to them, because they have such great stuff now.
Yeah. Well, that's what I got attracted to Python more recently, because I'm playing with it and I'm like, wow, this language is just like almost perfect. It's just, easy, and it makes sense. And the things they did were smart, but also hats off to Microsoft for doing C#, which is the next extension of C++, their own thing. But they made it open source, and there's people on all environments programming in C# because a lot of people really, really like it. So, those modern languages, man, go back to the Commodore 60. Heck, I remember the Commodore 64 Basic. You had to put line numbers in, and you had to number it like 10 and 20 and not just 1, 2, 3. Because if you forgot something and you had to put it in there
was no
needed
1.5 line. That's exactly right.
And there was nothing to tell you that your go-to 255 should now be go-to 300.
I made a living for a couple of years working for Pete Marwick, doing software tools that took old garbage COBOL, spaghetti COBOL, and made it into nice structured COBOL, so that a human being besides the original author could read it and understand what it was doing. Instead of having things that fell through, based on not only go-to structure, but just that it falls through, you had everything so you could see the movement of the flow of the code. And in those old places, like big insurance companies, utilities, banks that first had to go to big iron, to big computers, and you had either one guy that had been there for a long time and didn't render his secrets up easily because that was his employment insurance, or you had 50 people that had worked on it, all with their own idea as to what data naming conventions are and coding standards are. And it really was like, good Lord, this is like schizophrenically bad. This is just so cobbled together. I really, those were very cool tools. So hats off to, John Delmonico and Jerry Hawkins. And, I'm trying to think of the people who built these tools that figured out how to fix all that. John Hayes, who wrote, here's a way to get a measure of complexity of your code so that you can see out of your portfolio of 10,000 programs, if you fix these 10, you're going to get rid of 80% of your problems that you're having elsewhere, where people can't figure out, if I have to change the date come year 2000, where am I going to have to go in code to do that in all the data divisions and all that kind of stuff? And I know I'm dating myself with COBOL, but you know what I mean? That's it. Wow. I worked on the formatter for a while and was just being plunged into that, and like, wow, there's such smarts in here. They wrote it in COBOL, and writing something as sophisticated as that in COBOL was its own kind of like, it was amazing. So hats off to the whole, shout out to my Pete Marwick Catalyst Group team, because they were doing things that like nobody else in the world was doing that. And that's a real cool environment to like grow up as a coder, that you're not just, oh great, another reporting program for a bank. that instead they were doing really cool, sophisticated stuff and selling it to like governments and stuff like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So
Cool.
anyway.
Hey, I got two questions for you. First one, which brother's that with the eagle in the background?
Oh, let me see. Oh, actually, that's my nephew.
Oh,
And so it's like you asked me the most like, oh my God, I hope I don't get their names wrong. So that's Nick. My older brother has Ariel and Brian, and my younger brother has Relina and Nick, and that's Nick that has the entire Eagle Scout badge set.
yeah,
So
it looked
that happened within the last couple of years, and it was very cool to be like, wow, I don't know anybody else that I guess I knew of people had done it, but nobody else in my family had gotten the full set.
he
So
got
that's
all the merit badges.
Yeah, I think he did. I got enough
Nice.
to be an Eagle Scout, and I thought it kind of required, I don't know, like 39 out of 42. I think he might have had
Well,
everything.
Well,
So,
there's 100 and some different badges, but yeah,
oh,
there's
okay,
40-ish or so that are required. You have to get, or 30 something. It changes.
okay,
I mean,
right.
I got it in the Stone Age, so
Good for you.
but
Wow. Honestly, I think that's one of those things people always talk about. Hey, what do you put on your resume? Do you put Mensa on there? No, not necessarily. But if you were an Eagle Scout, that really means
well,
that even young, you had stick-to-itiveness. You
yes,
had multiple talents.
I
You know
got
what I mean?
involved back with scouts with my son, and I shake my head. It's not the organization it used to be,
Oh,
at
boy.
least not our
Okay.
local thing. But okay, so here I'm going to brag. This will be not even a humble brag. This is a straight out brag. So you start Boy Scouts when you're 12 after Webelos, and each rank there's a certain time period you have to be that rank for at least a minimum length of time and meet certain requirements, leadership and merit badges and certain amount of campouts, blah, blah, blah. So the shortest amount of time was like just a little over like 2 years, almost 2.5 years to go from the tenderfoot to eagle. Like that was, if you really worked on it.
Yeah.
So you start at 12. I got my eagle at 14 and a half.
That's
So
fantastic. Wow.
most people don't do it that quick, but, and you'll like this, my eagle project was down at West Branch. There was an old fishing trail, and I worked with the Army Corps of Engineers for this right down by the spillover dam. There was a mile-long trail. We converted it to a hiking trail. We put in bridges. We put stuff down for people to walk on. We put up signs. We made a booklet so people could identify things and did all that. So that was my eagle project.
That's impressive as all hell. Colleen and I, as you know, we go hiking all over the place.
Right.
We've seen probably half a dozen of those where here's a beautiful, a patio and a bench right on the river. That it was somebody's Eagle Scout project was to create this beautiful thing with the little placards that say you'll probably see loons here and stuff like that. So well, good for you and creating something so lasting.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because of you. That's cool.
It took almost a year completely to do
Wow.
with all the work and all that. And it was a mile long, and we had spots, marked, and there were 3 other Eagles after me that did projects on the trail that improved parts of things, this, that, and the other thing. So
they added to it because yeah, that's great.
And I remember it because the day we opened the trail and the newspaper was out, and, the local rep from Scouts and Army Corps of Engineer leader from Pittsburgh and blah, 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 all that jazz. They all came out. We had a big hoo-ha and all that. I was like, oh my God, talk faster, because I wanted to go see Back to the Future in the theater and they were taking too long. I didn't want to miss it.
Right. When you're 14, you got your priorities straight.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Honestly, that's like pre-high school. That's just amazingly cool. I made it to Webelos and I didn't advance anywhere beyond that. So good for you, man.
Thanks. So there's my brag.
Yeah.
Anyway, so here's my other question, something you mentioned as a topic a while back that we haven't touched. Explain to me what Wordle is. Now, I know it's an app. I know it's a word type game. I've not played it, but I've been seeing more and more people posting, and I see these weird blocks and people are like, oh my gosh. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking at.
Right. Honestly, this is very funny. I've never played it because I saw it come out quickly, and a lot of people, I have kind of an automatic aversion to fads. I don't want to get pulled into the next farm game or the next
Right.
League of Legends game or whatever else it might be. So even though it was a word game, I've resisted it. And I'm not sure why, because I usually love Scrabble and other things. The way it works is you have 6 tries to get a 5-letter word, and you guess a word, and then it tells you which of the letters are yes, correct, and in the correct place, and which of the letters are, it is that letter is in the word somewhere, but it's not in the correct place. And green is the one where it's both of those things, and yellow is the one where it's the right letter, but in the wrong place. Made a little complex because for instance, if you have multiple uses of the same letter in Dolly, it'll tell you L, but it won't give you 2 L's because it doesn't have any way to show that for your 1 L that you use in your starter word. And so people, there's a whole now kind of interesting set of skills, the science behind. So what's a good word to start with? Well, there's a letter distribution. If I remember right, it's something like eta oin shridlu, that those are
Right.
the most commonly used. And so you try to come up with, I'll try stone, because that way it'll have, 2 of the vowels and STN, which are common, and I'll get a lot of information for that. And then the next one will be something like, I don't know, metal or something like that, where it'll be the vowels you haven't used yet. And I already am wrong because I used the E, but by gathering that, you'll be able to quickly get to, okay, I know 4 out of the 5 letters, apply my anagramming skills. And so people often get it 2, 3, 4. Once in a while, and you'll see this, people will really grouse about it because they got a word like, it's got 4 out of the 5 letters correct, but the one that they're missing, there's many possibilities. So if you have like STA blank E, it could be stale or stare
State.
or state and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes you'll see them get really close after the second or third word and then get 3 swings and misses because they kept trying to guess the letter instead of, well, what letters could it be? I'll think of a word that has 3 of those 5 letters, and whichever one, you know what I mean? There's kind of a guessability to it that you can apply if you
Right.
want to.
Well,
Some people have never missed one. They really are really good at their vocabulary, and they're really good at that little science of making good guesses. And once in a while, people will say, well, I just blew it for the first time because I was so certain that it was, I don't know, all those things, and turned out to be steak. I didn't guess the K. Darn it. That kind of thing. So
well, I can see how that appeals to the Mensons. A group puzzle game. It's words.
exactly.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
definitely see that.
It is cool. It's kind of funny. I should be doing it, but fighting against that is at one point I was playing Scrabble online and I was finding out that I was dedicating like, I don't know, an hour a day to it, because if you're playing, you can play multiple games and when somebody else has gone, they tell you and you can go back on. And so it was like, it didn't seem to be taking a lot of time. I would go on and I played pretty quickly. But then the cumulative thing was I was playing an hour a day. And when I looked and I said, man, what could I be doing with that hour?
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm already pretty good at Scrabble. I'm not necessarily getting that much better. And I could be out walking in that hour. I could be sorting comic books in that hour. And I just kind of pulled back. And now I have the thing of, I don't want to start in anything that I could see be, and I don't think Wordle can be an hour. It probably is 2 minutes out of your day. But
it has that addiction quality. So every 10, 15 minutes, you're just checking real quick or whatever.
Like that. I think I mentioned I was in a very cool trivia league called, why is it escaping me? Sorry, Learned League. And a really great guy, Thorsten I Integrity, does really good, high quality trivia things. And there's a little bit of you're matched against a certain person and you bet on what the probability that you think they're going to get the answers just like they're betting on yours. So you assign points, if you will. And I was doing okay because I know a lot of trivia, but what I was discovering was I really didn't like that was like you had to do it every day for the course of 30 days or something like that. And I didn't like the fact that that was on my mind. I'm overseeing a show at Playhouse Square from 8 to 11. I'm loving the show. And then instead of, oh, well, let's just go to Aladdin's because they're open late and have a little late night nosh. No, got to get home because I didn't get my Learned League in and I got to get it in or I forfeit. And forfeiting is really bad. And I don't know, I didn't like the fact that I was making it the most important thing. And then it ended poorly. As you might imagine, there's a whole bunch of good trivia people in it from College Bowl days and Jeopardy days and stuff like that. And so it really matters to some people a lot. and I was doing pretty well, but I haven't really been that guy. I wasn't a big, it's academic, you know what I mean? I wasn't in that field. So the more that I got, that I did well, there were things like, who is this guy? I'm like, well, just be kind to me. Just be happy that I'm doing okay. I made a big mistake. They have big rules about cheating too. You know what I mean? You really, why would you cheat about a trivia contest? But there really are people that apparently their ego is in it, or I don't know. So while you're working on it, of course you can't, what's the point of looking something up online? You know what I mean? You answer the questions. I There was a cool question that I was curious about, and I made a copy of it so I could look it up later. Apparently, you can't even do that. That looks suspicious. And
Wow.
so I got booted because I'm pretty sure that that's what they thought I had done. And it's kind of funny. Well, but I had submitted my answers and I didn't look it up until afterwards. But they don't know the timing of that or something, I guess. And so I'm sad because I was kind of enjoying it, but for those reasons of it can't be the most important thing in my life. And like, why isn't this just fun? That instead, and so I hope you don't mind. This is kind of a weird confessional. As you know, I was on Jeopardy and I won once, but I became very aware on Jeopardy of how I kind of got like butterflies in my stomach because, oh, now this isn't sitting around at a Mensa gathering and just throwing out answers. And if anything, first saying a funny answer, because that's more fun, and then saying the real answer, that it was important. You're playing for money on Jeopardy.
Right.
So why did I lose on Jeopardy? Because I kept like betting big money. And then because it was a big question, I would kind of, my mind would go weird. I wouldn't be all calmly answering. I would get all kind of twitchy. Well, the same thing was happening in this Learned League thing. Then I a couple times got into the final rounds where, there's going to be a championship. And after I had gotten, I don't know, pretty consistently 80% of questions right or something like that, in the final I'd get like 50 because the questions are that much harder. And also because I could just see it's, I'm not performing well under pressure. I'm not that guy. I never really thought of it that way. I never really thought I was the guy that if I was to come up, bottom of the ninth at bat, that I'd be the guy that would whiff instead of getting a single or hitting a homer or something like that. But somehow that was happening often enough that was also people saying, well, and also you're not just doing it online, there's somebody observing you. You know what I mean? To make sure that there's no cheating. And so it's like, I don't know, I was friends with them. How you doing, Scott? Let's go. And I got enough weird, tough ones that it really proved I know a lot about Mad Magazine. I know a lot about your sports trivia, even though I'm not a big sport head, but my numbers were such that people were not happy with me. You know what I mean? And so I just, why am I doing this? Why am I going into this situation? If it matters a lot to certain people, let them have it then.
Yeah.
I didn't like how I was handling it. I didn't like the stringency of it. To me, trivia, like it's kind of built into the name. It's not Significa. It's trivia. Does it really matter that I know who was what number you dialed in Dial M for murder? To me, it's funny if you
gotta be
get
fun.
the name of the planet that was the ice planet in Star Wars, but it doesn't matter. It never matters. You know what I mean? It only matters to the people that memorize lists of international currencies and stuff
And
like
memorizing
that.
trivia doesn't necessarily mean your IQ is high or smart, and getting it wrong doesn't mean that opposite either.
And there is that, and maybe that's got to be part of it. Is that it isn't about being smart. I have real respect for people that have amazing memories. It's very cool to have that photographic or near eidetic memory. The people that can name for every song, like the artist and the label that it was on and what year it came out. That's really kind of an amazing savant skill. But I know it's a savant skill. It only matters if you go on and play Jeopardy or you go on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And so it's it could be handy. It made me a couple $1,000s, but I wasn't going to make a living off of the fact that I remember Saturday morning cartoon show theme songs.
Right.
You know what I mean?
It's like magic. I've played Magic a large portion of my life, and I go down to my friends and we play Magic. I love it. But I've only played in a few tournaments, and I never enjoy it as much because they're out for blood. They're out to kill. They're out to be number one and the best.
Mm-hmm.
And with Magic, it's one of those things that if you spend more money, you'll get better cards. So it compensates for skill. And to some degree, I mean, you still have to have some skill to it, definitely. but
Yeah.
I never wanted to spend that money. I never wanted to be that hardcore. I never wanted to be, like you said, I have to go every Friday now to defend my title and to move up in ranking. I want to
Exactly.
go and have fun.
That's right. We talked about this in a very early episode. I had really odd skills when I was young. Like I could play chess very well. I could solve cryptograms very well. But when I got like approached with, "Hey, you could be a chess master," it was like, "Well, I don't know that I want to do only that. Don't you have to kind of be Bobby Fischer and be
Yeah.
kind of crazy, isolate yourself, study chess all the time?" I kind of wanted to do a lot of different things, and I wanted to have fun doing it. So whenever Colleen and I talked about, "Hey, we should go to the crossword puzzle tournament in Stamford, Connecticut," always what I say is, "Well, I want to go in whatever the division is that says, I'm curious as to how I would do, but I don't care. I'm
Right.
not competitive in that way." And I like to be around word people, but the people that are too fanatic about it, I don't want to be around them.
Yeah.
I don't want to be where
Well,
all of that.
that's why at some of the RGs, when they have the tournaments, now those are, just local minor tournaments and they don't mean anything past Sunday.
Yeah,
But a lot of
yeah.
times I won't play because there are some people on certain games and you learn who they are, that they're just cutthroat and they're like out for blood. And if you happen to be on their team and you make a mistake, if you're not paying attention, they're on your case. And that's too much stress. It's a game, which is by definition supposed to be fun.
Yeah.
And if I'm
You
that
know what?
stressed,
It's kind of funny that I think I got an early impression of this from like Mad Magazine of all places. They used to have lots of references, maybe in Dave Berg's things, about how couples would almost divorce over playing bridge. You know
right.
what I mean? That they'd be analyzing the game and that you threw the wrong card and they were really angry
Oh,
about it. And I was like, I learned to play bridge in college. And same thing, I was okay because I memorize well, I know the conventions, etc. But then when I got into that thing of, well, now you have to come every Tuesday and Friday and play regularly, and you got to find a partner that you're compatible with. And I was like, I just can I play casually? No, they immediately try to kind of induct you
right.
into, you know what I mean? I'm being groomed to be a chess master. And another one of those things that even at like other tournaments, I just I don't want to have to get any better than I already am for playing Scrabble. I'm really quite good at it. I have a good anagramming ability, and but I don't want to memorize the 2-letter and 3-letter word lists because that's absolutely essential to be a competitive Scrabble player,
Right.
which is like itself, like, really? So he's a world-class sprinter, is he? When is sprinting going to matter? But anyway, you know what I
Except when
mean?
you're
So
being chased by a bear.
while I watch the Olympics, I'm aware of that's a pretty rarefied skill.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so is bridge, and so is Scrabble, and so is magic, and all the
Yeah.
things we're talking about.
But I like to do, like you said, a lot of different things, and I like different games and stuff, but I've never really cared so much about being the champion. I just want to play. I just joined a kickball league in Cuyahoga Falls.
Good for you.
I've wanted to either play soccer or softball, but the problem is they want a whole team to sign up. And where I live, everything's far away and nobody else around me wants to do it. So this Cuyahoga Falls Kickball League, you can sign up independently. And once they get a full team of independents, they
They'll
throw you.
assign you.
I'm
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
great, I'll do it. I'm there. So as long as we get a few more people, I'll be playing and I'm happy. Kickball is not the one I wanted to do, but I want to get out and a little exercise and some people
I hear
so
you.
we'll
That's
see.
honestly, that's a great idea. Like I used to play softball in Chicago all the time. In Chicago, remember, it's 16-inch. It's not mitts. It's the big,
Right.
marshmallow of a ball. And occasionally, when I went up against people that were like trying to take it too seriously, I I would play, but I would make fun of it all the time. You know what I mean? Like my infield chatter would always be making fun of the fact that we're caring too much about
Yeah. It's
position. Oh, this guy's not a hitter. Bring him in. It's like, oh yeah, you got to worry. Oh, I won't even go into it. In college and then in downtown leagues from Pete Marwick and where I worked at, consulted to Ameritech, they had a big softball summer league. And I would be like, bring my dog Fenris. He'd be the hit of the party because he's just such a cuddly, real plush toy. And then I'd like, hey, can I bring my Diet Coke out there and set it down while I play third base or something like that? I just tried to make it how unserious I was taking. And
right.
the alpha males, ha ha, were taking it so hard.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? And I never fluffed it. I never like voluntarily missed something. I tried to play well, but I didn't have that like in the gut need to win. And
yeah.
that's been the story of my life.
And I figure this is kickball. I mean, the only other thing would be dodgeball. If you're taking those two seriously, you need to reevaluate your life.
Yeah. Colleen and I love playing mini golf. And one of the reasons that we love it is because how can you take it seriously?
Yeah.
Wow, you brought your turbocharged ultra putter so that you could hit the crocodile's head and it went onto the magic lily pad just perfectly. You must be very proud.
Right.
And it's a great equalizer, not only between her and I, but with everybody. You just can't take it seriously. I don't want to become a golfer. I don't want to get up at 5 a.m. and keep knocking strokes off because I'm getting better in practicing. I want it to be what we just talked about, fun and lighthearted and inherently silly,
Yeah.
So.
And that actually, the one place I worked, they had some sort of golf tournament, and I almost went to it, but something came up, whatever, I don't know. But the way they did it was like the perfect way to do it. I thought it was wonderful because I'm like, guys, you don't want me. I don't golf. I've never golfed. I'm going to hit the weeds. I might only make it halfway to the green. It'll be a par 27 or something. And they're like, it doesn't matter. It's a scratch game. I'm like, what the hell is a scratch game? Well, you have teams of 4 and they only take the highest score. So even if you're the one that sucks the whole time, you don't bring the whole team down.
That's right.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that.
Right.
No
you play
pressure.
the best shot, exactly that, And it's funny, when I've occasionally played golf, and that's like, get me to the pin. My short game is really good. I play a lot of mini golf. And they would laugh, but it'd be like, I was a pretty good putter because that's my distance, I guess, is 20 feet, not 400 yards or whatever else.
Did I tell you? Oh my gosh. We found a bowling place down here. We went bowling a couple weeks back. And I'm okay. I used to actually go bowling with my grandmother who was on a league and had trophies and stuff. So it's one of those things where people are like, oh, the nerd's going up to play. Oh my God, you got a strike. That's what happens. I'm not great. When I hit 120, I'm like, whoa, good game. But better yet, I don't know if I told you, they have axe throwing at this place. How cool is that?
Unless you're a Norseman, you don't have a lot of experience doing that.
No,
anybody.
But you know how much fun it is to throw an axe and get it to sink into the wood, and you're like, oh my gosh, I got to do that again. So something we should do sometime.
Did you do the Johnny Carson? Remember where they had the guy that was Davy Crockett's Indian companion? And on a famous Johnny Carson episode, they had him demonstrating his axe throwing skills. And as I recall, it didn't hit the guy in the head. It hit him right in a very tender area.
Well, we had that on America's Funniest Videos forever.
Exactly. It's like, I guess this guy is now, emasculated or something like that. No, circumcised. I said circumcised, if I remember right. So.
Well, he was trying to hit wood, so you never know.
Boom, boom. Exactly.
Okay, well, now we've degraded. Well, hey, I'm going to have to get going because I got to pick a kid up from school still.
Okay.
So
I'm out in California for this coming week. We can do this again next Tuesday or whatever works for you.
Okay.
I'm not flying out until late Tuesday night, if I remember right. So depending on whatever's easy for your schedule. I know that
we'll figure something out.
Ebb and flow. Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Get some things done, man. Talk to you later.
Absolutely.
You have been listening to the Relentless Geekery podcast. Come back next week and join Alan and Steven's conversation on geek topics of the week.